This is the Fantasy Football Fellowship Podcast. Welcome to a brand new season. This is the season premiere, the season preview, as we will discuss Fantasy Football Fellowship and the ministry that we have going on here at Unpacking It. Also, I'm going to share 5 players that I'm convinced I already know I want to draft this season. 5 players I'm convinced I don't want to draft based on where they're going right now in fantasy drafts. And then there are 5 situations that I'm just confused by, I'm unsure about. And so we'll discuss that as well. And so this will be a fun kind of just a little teaser to the upcoming season here on the Fantasy Football Fellowship Podcast. And so we stopped this show kind of in January as the season ended, and now we are back to prepare for the upcoming NFL season that will be here before we know it. Training camps starting up in a couple of weeks, and so there are so many fantasy football questions to discuss, and so here at Unpacking It, we are a ministry for sports fans, and so we have content year round. For you as a sports fan, and we cover a number of different sports throughout the year. When it comes to football season, we add this Fantasy Football Fellowship podcast to be able to really focus on fantasy football, and then also each week on this show, once the season begins, we will have weekly breakouts, and so we will take a fantasy concept related to the Bible, related to life on this show, and then we'll also do some fantasy coaching, fantasy discussions. We'll talk about some of the news and notes around the fantasy football community and what's happening as we play fantasy football. But let's get back to the heart of, or let's get to the heart of Fantasy Football Fellowship and really what we want you to participate in this season. So we've created the framework and the content that is designed for your fantasy league to meet throughout the season during league meetings. And we provide you the content, the topics, the discussion questions, so that you can experience meaningful fellowship with the guys in your league, the other people in your league, whatever the makeup of that league may be. And so whether you've been playing for over 20 years like I have, or if you're new to fantasy football, you can participate in Fantasy Football Fellowship. Of course, you can listen to the podcast, but more importantly, incorporate this into your league. And so how do you do it? You go to fantasyfootballfellowship.com. You sign up for our free membership. That's right. This year we made the big change thanks to the generosity and support of our donors at Unpacking It Ministries. We've made Fantasy Football Fellowship available for everyone for free this season. And so we're grateful for you and anyone else that wants to continue to support us moving forward. But we want our content and the strategies and the tools and the tips that help you and your league find meaning and purpose throughout the season, grow in fellowship, grow in your faith. That's what we want to help you do throughout the season. And fantasyfootballfellowship.com has all of those details. And so here's my passion. I'm passionate to see sports fans following Jesus. That's why we do Unpacking It. That's why we do Fantasy Football Fellowship. And so we really believe that fantasy football is a blast. But if we just play fantasy football, then that's it. What if we actually played fantasy football with purpose? And we actually viewed fantasy football through the lens of Scripture, God's word, what it means to grow in our faith, what it means to experience true, lasting fellowship with the other managers in our league. And so that's what Fantasy Football Fellowship is all about. And so we hope that you will participate in incorporating this into your current league, maybe start a new league to say, hey guys, we're going to meet every week. We're going to talk about fantasy concepts that relate to the Bible, relate to life, and get as many guys in your league that will want to participate to get them a part of it. Or maybe you bring this to your church and say, hey, this can be small group curriculum content that we use in our life group at church. And whether you have an established group or you start a new one, Fantasy Football Fellowship is also designed for churches. And so check that out as well. And so a lot of different ways you can utilize the resources that we have made available for free on our website, fantasyfootballfellowship.com. So become a member today. It's free. You can sign up for the manager membership, the league leader or commissioner membership, or the church partner membership. And so those are all the different options available for you. All right, let's talk more about this podcast. So over the last couple of seasons, I've had an awesome co-host, Harrison Zuckerberg, and I've got good news and bad news. The good news is he's still in the mix. He was here in the studio, I guess last week, and he's got some changes going on in his life and his career, and so he's not going to be able to commit to being a co-host this season. However, he's going to continue to be a contributor on fantasyfootballfellowship.com. So if you're a loyal listener of this podcast, you remember our segment, Is He Legit? And that was a word that Harrison, he messed up on a show one time. He said legit, and I gave him a hard time about it. We created a whole segment about it. Anyway, he's going to have a weekly kind of column and feature on our website to help coach us throughout the season. He's awesome at fantasy, has a lot of great insights, and so we're excited to have him a part of things moving forward. The exciting news for us, if you're a loyal listener of the Unpacking It podcast, you heard the show that we did with Trip Smith. And so he's in Charlotte, and so he's going to be the weekly co-host beginning in August. And so we're excited to have him on this show. He's been playing fantasy football a long time. He's also a pastor, and so has the heart that we want behind this ministry and what we're all about. Yes, we love fantasy. Yes, we want to help you win, but more importantly, we want to help you find meaning and purpose throughout the fantasy season. And so Trip's going to help us do that as well. So we're fired up for that. In the month of July, our podcasts are going to include some interviews. And so we're going to talk to different people in the fantasy community, the NFL community, and we'll talk faith and life and fantasy with them. We are scheduled to talk to one of the greats in fantasy football, Andy Holloway from the Fantasy Footballers, the #1 fantasy podcast. And so we're excited to have him on. He's been a guest before. We look forward to catching up with him. And so here's the encouragement. Make sure that you are subscribed to the Fantasy Football Fellowship podcast. Also, make sure you're subscribed to the Unpacking It podcast, 2 different feeds in Apple or Spotify, and also YouTube. So make sure you're subscribed to both. This episode today, we've made available in both channels. Moving forward, at some point this summer, will be exclusive on the Fantasy Football Fellowship feed. So you won't get duplicate episodes in both feeds. So make sure you're signed up for both, subscribe to both, and that's how we'll set it up moving forward. So this episode today, want to just kind of give you the summary, the overview of what we're doing here, let you in on this. We are in this together. And so we're thankful to have you a part of the Fantasy Football Fellowship community. If you're new, welcome. Want to give you some, kind of an understanding of what's going on as well. But the bottom line is we love fantasy football. I've been playing. I got my fantasy rings, my fantasy trophy here in the studio. I love playing fantasy football. I love doing mock drafts. I'm already doing mock drafts. I've been doing them the last maybe a month or so at this point. But more importantly, I just want to see fantasy managers look at fantasy football through a different lens. And so it's amazing the number of fantasy concepts that relate to the Bible, that relate to life, that we've been talking about the last few years. We've got fresh ideas for this season. God gave me actually a couple ideas while I was in the ocean a few weeks ago. So some cool concepts that we'll be writing about and talking about all throughout the season. We call these fantasy breakouts. And so again, that will be a key part of this show, but really it's a key part of what Fantasy Football Fellowship is all about for your leagues to discuss throughout the season. All right. So there we go. Little housekeeping. And so hopefully that answers some of your questions. If you are going to participate in Fantasy Football Fellowship, get your leagues together now, especially if you're going to do this at a church, get it in process. Now's the time. And there's an encouragement there for sure. All right, you ready for a little fantasy coaching here today? I'm going to share some of my fantasy thoughts, some of my insights so far, doing some mock drafts, doing some, research, getting it going, I'm going to let you in. Sometimes I hate doing it because then other members of my leagues, they listen in, they like to steal some of my advice, but hey, this is for the people. It's for you. I'm trying to share, and here's the key. We always say this on the show. We are not always right, but we're always convincing. So we want to be convincing, but we're not going to be right. And I've played fantasy a long time. I've won leagues. I've won a lot of games, a lot of matchups. I've also lost, but I've learned from both. And we know how fantasy football goes. I think back to last year, I had a really bad season in one of my leagues. I drafted Nick Chubb in the first round. He got hurt game one. And so that's what happens in fantasy football. So that's part of the deal. And I was convinced that he was going to be awesome. And I stand by why I was convinced last year. But he got hurt. I can't predict that. So we hold fantasy football with open hands, knowing that we don't know the future. We can't control everything. And the same is true in life. We make plans, we prepare, we ultimately open up our hands and say, Lord, I trust you. I'm surrendered to you. And I know that I'm not in control. There's certain things that I've got, a certain level of control over, but ultimately my trust is in you, Lord. And so that's the heartbeat of this ministry. And it does translate to fantasy football as well. So, all right, here we go. I'm going to give you 5 players that I'm convinced I want to draft. Again, it's early in the summer. Things change, trades, injuries, all that kind of thing. But at least at this moment, here are 5 players that I am prepared to draft. If I had to draft a team today, here's who I'm targeting. In the first round, I want Bijan Robinson. Absolutely. I'm willing to take him second overall. That's how high I'm willing to take him because I believe in the talent. I believe in the coaching change in Atlanta. I like Raheem Morris taking over. I like the quarterback situation in the sense either Kirk Cousins or Michael Penix Jr. will be a good quarterback there. Much better than what we experienced in Atlanta last year. So that was a debacle of an offense. They didn't maximize, they didn't capitalize the weapons that they have. And Bijan Robinson is the best weapon that they have. He's young, second year. He was still really an RB1 fringe, maybe RB2 last year, but he's going to be, if not the best, the second best behind Christian McCaffrey this season. I really believe it. I believe the opportunity will be there. The news or notes that are coming out of mini camps and what we heard from him and the coaching staff, all positive. What you want to hear this time of year in regards to what he's going to do this season. So fired up for him. One of the more intriguing teams in how we evaluate where to draft these players this year are on the Buffalo Bills because they get rid of Stephon Diggs and they've been, as a team, there's a level of disappointment these last couple of seasons because they haven't gone as far in the playoffs. But from a fantasy standpoint, we know Josh Allen wins fantasy leagues. But without Stephon Diggs, what does that mean for Josh Allen? So there's some questions around him. But here's who I'm convinced I want to draft. Dalton Kincaid. Last year, we saw glimpses of him as well. Another second-year guy. So you'll learn this about me. I'm always a little hesitant about rookies. I like to see let me see them in the NFL before I spend a high draft pick on rookies in fantasy. But with Dalton Kincaid, I think we saw enough. I like the chance that he has to be, if not the number one priority in that offense in the passing game, at least, right up there. He's going to get plenty of targets, plenty of opportunities. I believe he'll score touchdowns. And, we were a little concerned because Dawson Knox is a nice tight end, and he'll be the tight end too in Buffalo. But Dalton Kincaid, the athleticism, the draft capital, the Bills drafted him early in the NFL draft last season. So right now, Dalton Kincaid is tight end 5. He's being drafted as the tight end 5. I think he's got a chance to be a top 3 tight end. So you always want to get value when you draft. You want to take somebody and expect that they're going to either hit the expectations of where you're drafting him or exceed those expectations, right? That's the simplicity of this. I believe he will exceed that. So he's going 52nd overall right now in mock drafts. And I think he'll be better than that. So he'll either live up to it or be better than it. So I'm targeting Dalton Kincaid. All right. It's always interesting how we approach veteran running backs. And this offseason was wild in the NFL for the running back position. Almost every running back switched teams. Josh Jacobs, Aaron Jones, Saquon Barkley. But the one I want to talk about is Austin Eckler. So Austin Eckler has been one of my favorite players in the NFL throughout his career. Remember, he was the underrated guy that was getting a little bit of time when Melvin Gordon was with the Chargers. Then Eckler took over, became a superstar in fantasy football, helped me have a tremendous season years ago, was great on my teams. Then last year, the Chargers were a letdown. Austin Eckler was a huge letdown. And the question is he just now too old? He's hit that mark and he's just not going to be an effective running back anymore and not an effective fantasy player. And it's a fair question for sure, but I want to take him. I like that he's in Washington. I like that he goes there with Brian Robinson, that they can have a 1-2 punch. And I don't think, I've never thought this. Eckler doesn't have to have a ton of touches to make a big impact. And I think him being even that complement player. So right now he's going as running back 39. That's late. That's good value. I think he can be better than that. And so he's going 126 overall. So this is a mid to late round draft pick that you're spending to get Austin Eckler. But the word out of Washington is they're going to be much better this year. And I tend to believe that. Dan Quinn. And so we'll talk over the next few weeks and leading up to the season, other Washington players. But I want to just today get out in front of it. I'm buying the move for Austin Eckler in Washington and being a part of that offense. Listen, he's not going to be an RB1 again. But with where he's being drafted, I like it as a RB3 or 4 on your team. That's nice. You get some good weeks out of him. And as a fill-in guy during bye weeks, I like that. All right, here's the quarterback that I'm targeting this year. Joe Burrow. Bouncing back from an injury. He's going to be hungry. Hopefully he's healthy. And we know he's got the weapons. We know Jamar Chase is awesome. They kept T. Higgins. And Burrow, when healthy, is an unbelievable quarterback. Right now, he's going as quarterback 8. I think he'll be the 5th best quarterback. So I think he's got a great chance to exceed expectations. The hesitation with him is he doesn't get rushing yards. So you love Josh Allen, you love Jalen Hurts because they run the ball. Lamar Jackson, Anthony Richardson. So I understand some of the hesitation, but the price that you pay for him when you draft him, he's 93rd overall. He's going in like that 5th round, 6th round. I'm okay with that. I've got some other guys that you can get later on that I like value, but we'll talk about that in a few weeks. And then here is my 5th guy that I'm convinced I want to draft. Write this down. Save the tape. Here we go. His name, Kamani Vidal. Hopefully I said that right. But I watched this player last year. He played at Troy. I'm an App State guy. Sadly, App State lost to Troy because this running back ran all over my Mountaineers. And he is awesome. He is a legit running back. And guess where he went? The Los Angeles Chargers. Jim Harbaugh. They are looking for a new running back to replace Austin Eckler. And they brought in Gus Edwards. Fine. Nice player. J.K. Dobbins. Always injured. This is the guy you want in the Chargers backfield. It may not be week 1, but at some point this season, Vidal is going to be turning heads, shocking people, surprising people. Remember last year we saw Devon A-Chain, whatever we want to call him. He goes by both, just like Bijan and Bijan, right? We talked about that on the podcast last year. Don't get me started on confusing names, but pronunciations. But Vidal, write it down. I'm telling you, this guy, so right now he's going running back 47. This is the breakout candidate that you want on your radar. So he finished his Troy career setting the all-time single season and single game rushing records. So all-time total rushing, single season, and single game. He had 248 yards in a game. The guy's unbelievable. He finished the year with the second most rushing yards in the country last season. So he's a top running back. And he went late in the NFL draft, but the Chargers got him because Harbaugh's going to run the ball. And they're going to be much better this year too. So I'm excited to hopefully get him in as many leagues as I can as that late round flyer and expecting big things. All right. Here are the 5 guys that at this point I don't want to draft. I think they're either overhyped or I don't like how high you have to draft them in drafts. The first one, sometimes people love him as their number 1 wide receiver, Justin Jefferson. And we know he's awesome. We know he signed the big deal. We know he's a great wide receiver. But you have to take him in the top 5. I can't trust him with Sam Darnold as the quarterback, J.J. McCarthy as the quarterback in Minnesota. I've got to see that to believe it. When I take a first-round pick, I got to be really confident in the situation. And I'm not confident in that Minnesota situation for Justin Jefferson. So I'm out on taking him that early. Now, if he's slipped to the second round for some reason, all right, now it's a different story. But I doubt that happens. So I'm out on him. The second guy I'm out on, Najee Harris. I was out on him last year, and that continues. I like Jaylen Warren better, so that's who I'm taking in the Pittsburgh backfield. Right now, Najee Harris is 85th overall, running back 21. So you're expecting him to be an RB2. I'm not confident enough in that. Now, Pittsburgh's going to be a fascinating team that we'll talk about throughout, the offseason leading up to the fantasy drafts. But Harris isn't the guy I'm targeting. No, thank you. All right, the third guy I'm out on, and he's awesome too, Saquon Barkley. We know he's great. But what will his role be in Philadelphia? I don't think he's going to be a workhorse back. And that's okay because Philadelphia's going to want to win games. They want to go win a Super Bowl. So he's going to be great for them from an NFL standpoint, and he's going to fit in very nicely. But they have a lot of mouths to feed. I like A.J. Brown the most in that offense. And so with Jalen Hurts being a running quarterback, I just, and having plenty of weapons, I just don't know if there's enough there for Barkley. So right now he's RB6, 21st overall. So you're taking him in the second round. You're drafting him as your number 1 running back on your roster. I can't do that. It's a new team. I just, in New York, he was their guy. He had 1,000 carries a game, right? Or whatever it was. They relied on him in a huge way. The Eagles don't have to do that. So good for them. Not so great for fantasy managers who are expecting Barkley to have the same volume that he had in New York. It's not realistic. The fourth guy I'm just out on is David Montgomery. Now, he had a surprisingly strong season last year in Detroit and was a great 1-2 punch with Jahmyr Gibbs. But Detroit decided to make him sort of their one in the 1-2 punch. Gibbs was awesome toward the end of the season. If you listen to the show last year, you know how high I was on Jahmyr Gibbs, and I still am. Gibbs is 1A this season. You want Gibbs. And so with Montgomery, right now in drafts, he's going RB18. RB18? Come on. That's way too early. You can't count on Montgomery. That was another year of tread on the tires for him. And I think Gibbs is way too talented to not give him more opportunity, more carries. Montgomery's a great complementary piece, and he may snag some touchdowns here or there, but he got so much opportunity early in the season, and Gibbs was banged up at one point too. I just don't see that being the case again. Like, Montgomery will be fine, and if you draft him as an RB3 or 4, maybe, but I'm not taking him as an RB2. Are you kidding me? No, thank you. All right, the last guy. Oh, everybody's favorite player last year, the breakout, the shocker, the unbelievable waiver ad last year. Puka Nacua. No, thank you. I'm not drafting him 10th overall. I got to see him do it again. He had a great year. But let's not forget, Cooper Kupp is still there. Does Matthew Stafford, is he going to be back at a premier level this season? I got some questions with the Rams. And for Nacua, he was unbelievable, no doubt about it. But you're going to say that he's the 7th best wide receiver in fantasy? That's how you have to draft him. Last year was fun because he was a surprise. So he exceeded everyone's expectations. So it was worthwhile to draft him. Or, well, yeah, you picked him up. You didn't even draft him. You picked him up. If he was on your roster, you're laughing. You're laughing. You're winning games. This year, you got to take him in the first round. I got to see it happen again. That makes me nervous. That makes me a little nervous on him. So there you go. Those are the 5 guys I'm not drafting as of today. We'll leave you with this. Couple more minutes today. The 5 guys I'm most unsure but intrigued about. Guys I'm really interested in. Guys I've been interested in recent years, but their situation's a little cloudy, a little concerned. All right, let's start with Brandon Ayuk. I love Brandon Ayuk. And if you listened last year, you knew that I was in on him and you got good value on him last year. This year, he's going 18th overall. 18th overall. I'm nervous. Does he get a contract? How valued is he in the offense? Will Kittle get more opportunity this season? Debo, last year, he was inconsistent. Does he become more involved in the offense? Does Brock Purdy continue to be as great as he's been? So, and then how does the Super Bowl hangover, losing the Super Bowl for the 49ers, how does that affect the team this season? So Brandon Ayuk, as talented as he is, as much as I like him, I just got too many concerns to take him 18th overall. So essentially in the second round. The second concerning situation is in Houston. Now, we love Houston. Houston's the hyped team this year. Last year, they were underrated. And so for me, I was all in on Nico Collins. I had him on multiple teams, and he was fantastic for me. And I still love him. But this year, you got to take him 19th overall, just after Brandon Ayuk. Well, let's not forget, he's got now Stephon Diggs. He's got Tank Dell. So you have 3 different weapons. So CJ Stroud, he pulled, he steps back in the pocket. He's looking around. He goes, oh man, I got 3 unbelievable wide receivers and Dalton Schultz. And then they throw in Joe Mixon in the backfield. Houston should have high expectations because on paper, that is a strong team. However, will CJ Stroud pick up where he left off? How does he handle some of the hype and the higher expectations this season? Some of the pressure. Hey, it's Super Bowl. It's kind of Super Bowl or bust for the Texans, which is crazy to say, but that's where they're at following last year's playoff run. And so there's going to be hype for all these guys. And so you have to draft them high in fantasy drafts. I'm just not sure that I'm willing to do that. Do I want to take Tank Dell 36th overall if he's the 3rd guy in the pecking order? Will there be enough volume? There could be, but will there be enough? We have to see it play out. Who will Stroud's favorite receiver be if all 3 guys are out there and healthy? Will it be inconsistent? Will it be spread out? And so all 3 are great receivers, but if they each get, 4 or 5 catches a game, it's great for the team. It's spread out, and one of them, 2 of the 3 score, but you're playing a guessing game on who it's going to be every week. So I'm hesitant with all 3 of those guys. So it'll be tough for me to pass on Nico, but I think you have to at 19th overall. The third situation, or this is more of a specific player, Travis Kelce. Last year, I was adamant about drafting him in the first round. I thought it was worth it. And it turned out not to be, right? It was definitely a letdown toward the end of the regular season for sure. You have to draft him as tight end 2. Sam Laporta has passed him as the number 1 tight end to draft. So Kelce's going 37th overall. I'm not convinced that I'm willing to do that. So the jury's out. I'm just as confident as I was in him last year. There's hesitation there. And you do have to factor in the Taylor Swift shenanigans. I don't know how that's going to affect him. He's traveling. He's going to concerts. I don't know. Is he all bought in? They just won the Super Bowl. Does he come out of the gate strong? Maybe not. Maybe not. The Chiefs, they'll probably get going midway through the season and flip the switch, but that might hurt us for fantasy purposes. So there's some concern with Kelce, as great and amazing as he is, and he's awesome for fantasy usually. The fourth situation is in Cincinnati. I told you I love Joe Burrow. I'm intrigued by the running backs. So Zach Moss comes over as a free agent. He was great filling in for Jonathan Taylor last year in Indy and still carved out a role even when Jonathan Taylor was healthy. But I was reminded that Zach Moss is 27 years old. And so is he really emerging, or is he a breakout guy to where oh, now he gets a chance to be the guy in Cincinnati. He's going to be awesome. I'm a little hesitant about that. I'm unsure at this point. I might get there, but at this point, I'm just not convinced. Also, because I love Chase Brown. So he was the rookie there last year. He came on late in the season. Joe Mixon was out, and Chase Brown came in and was running all over the field. Now, Joe Burrow wasn't there, but Jacob Browning was awesome at quarterback. And the Bengals were better than you would have thought. But Chase Brown, you're drafting him running back 36, 119 overall. So I kind of like the value of Chase Brown. And so in some ways, I'm interested in both these guys. But do you want to load up on two Bengals running backs if you know the Bengals are probably going to pass more than run, right? Even though Mixon always had opportunities there. So that's intriguing. And then also they lost their offensive coordinator. Callahan is now the head coach in Tennessee, which leads me to my fifth situation that I'm a little unsure yet intrigued about. And that's in Tennessee. So we know that Callahan, maximized Joe Mixon and running the ball with him. In Tennessee, Tyjae Spears is the guy that was really good last year. He was like an RB3 with Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry, of course, gone in Baltimore. That opens up the door for Tyjae Spears to be even more involved this season. But then the Titans brought in Tony Pollard, who I love, but was somewhat of a disappointment, didn't live up to the expectations in Dallas last year for fantasy managers who drafted him late first round, early second round. So now the Titans have Spears and Pollard. And at the moment, I think I want both. But is that wise? Will one be better than the other? And so Spears is RB30, Pollard RB29. I kind of lean towards Spears, though. I'm more intrigued by Spears. So would I draft Spears before Pollard? So that's kind of the question that I've got for the Titans. So that one, again, the jury's still out. And so those are some of the concerns, some of the intriguing situations. There are more, and we will talk about those situations in the coming weeks. Do you target anybody on Denver? What do you do with the new look Seattle Seahawks? A lot of the same players, but new coaching staff. And you can go across the league, and a lot of fun, interesting situations that we as fantasy managers are going to try to navigate. So I hope that you'll join us for the journey throughout the fantasy season here at Fantasy Football Fellowship. And I hope that you will listen to the podcast, share it, rate, review, and comment. You can always, send me an email, Bryce at fantasyfootballfellowship.com. Any fantasy questions or thoughts or reaction. And we appreciate the comments on YouTube as well. And so check out fantasyfootballfellowship.com. Become a member today. It's free. Get your league involved. And our hope here at Fantasy Football Fellowship is that we will all play fantasy football with purpose. Let's grow in our relationship with Jesus. Let's grow in our fellowship with the other guys in our league. Let's build meaningful relationships. And we want to help you do that. And so we've got the content, the resources, the framework to come alongside of you and your league this season. So thanks so much for listening today here on the Fantasy Football Fellowship podcast. I'm Bryce Johnson. I'm a fantasy manager who follows Jesus. I believe in the good news that he died on the cross for my sin. He was resurrected, and through faith, I've been saved by his grace. I hope that is true for you as well, and I hope you'll join me as we live life as fantasy managers who follow Jesus together. Have a great rest of your day, and we will talk to you next time right here on the Fantasy Football Fellowship podcast.